Oh, snaps. You ready? What's up, everybody? Benji Bruce here with Speaking Lifestyle. We're going to get going with today's Facebook Live. So let's get going. Let's see who's going to hop on real quick. And we're going to talk about the difference between basically the successful speakers, the guys who are getting booked, and everybody else. So that's essentially what I want to go over real quick. I noticed it's like small differences between speakers who get booked and pretty much everybody else. A lot of people are in the everybody else phase in terms of just getting booked. So we're going to take people from the everybody else phase to the speakers who's getting booked consistently. And I thought about this just with everything, not about with speakers, but everything, every profession, real estate, insurance, every profession. There's always the people who are essentially struggling. Then there's the 1% who's doing really well. And so what's the difference between the two? So that's what I want to talk about. If you guys didn't watch yesterday's Facebook Live, make sure you do that as well, because yesterday we talked about finding events and then switching over to corporate. But we're going to talk about the difference between the two speakers. That's what I really want to talk about today. And these are small differences, right? So if you look at anything, like any industry, any sport, anything, you'll see there's always small differences. And this is why people get confused, because people say things like, I know that, or I'm doing that. And it's like a small tweak. And you're like, you're doing it, but you're not doing it right. There's a difference between a Kobe Bryant and a Michael Jordan versus all the other NBA players. It's small differences. And so it's like also just NBA or NFL versus college basketball or college football or any pro level versus any like college level. There's small differences in terms of the pros versus everyone else. And those small differences make a huge difference. And like you'll notice, if you watch pros in anything, pro basketball players, pro tennis players, pro golfers, pro NFL players, pro anything, you'll see that they're just a million times better. Like it's freaking crazy in terms of how better they are at it. And so that's why you want to pay attention to these little differences. And what happens with a lot of speakers especially is they say things like, I already have a website, or I'm already contacting people, or little things like that. And it's like, yeah, but you just want to make a little tweak and then you'll have it, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about those small tweaks that you want to make. All right, so what up, Andres, or maybe it's just Andre? What up? What up, Paul? What up, everybody? I can't see everybody else who joined, and it only shows a couple people. All right, so that's what I want to talk about. First, I want to talk about the unsuccessful speakers. And this is what I see. I think almost every speaker goes through this phase, and you want to get out of this phase as fast as possible. I can't stress this enough. I went through this phase. I mean, I think every speaker goes through this phase. It's one of those that's just natural. So the phase that I'm talking about, and this is where I see a lot of unsuccessful speakers, is they want other people to book gigs for them. So they're like, book a gig for me, I'll give you a 20% commission. Do this for me and I'll do all the work and give me all the money and I'll give you a 20% commission. That is hands down the number one reason why I see so many speakers struggle, because it's the mindset that comes along with that. The mindset is basically, I'm too lazy to do all the work, so please do the work for me and then I'm going to reap all the benefits. That's the mindset of that, to where it's like, book the gigs for me, I'll give you a percentage. And so there's a huge difference between someone who says, book the gigs for me, and then or I'm going to hire someone to book gigs for me, versus a person who says, book gigs for me, I'll give you a percentage. There's a small difference between the two. One person is saying, all right, I'm going to hire you just like I'm going to hire anybody. Like, just like I would hire a videographer, a web designer, I'm going to hire a person whose sole purpose is to book gigs for me. All right. So there's a huge difference between that versus the lazy speaker who's like, book gigs for me and build my business for me. There's a small difference. And so the difference is that there's the business owner. There's a business owner mindset of, look, I've got other things that I have to spend my time on. I have to spend my time on these things. They're more important, right? And so it's like, I'm just going to hire you to do this. And so it's not that the speaker isn't willing to do it. He just doesn't have time to do it. And then on top of that, he knows how to do it. Okay. If you don't know how to get yourself booked, you cannot tell other people to book gigs for you. All right. There's like a small difference with that. Just because when you tell other people to book gigs for you, they have no idea how to do it. So you have to teach them. And if you can't teach them, you're kind of screwed. So that is probably the biggest reason why I see so many speakers struggle. And you have to get out of that phase as fast as possible. The book gigs for me phase, you just have to get out of that as fast as possible. So that's the number one thing. The other thing is, a lot of the unsuccessful speakers give up too soon. And this isn't just with speakers. Like, once again, this is with anything. I don't think people realize how long it takes to succeed at something. And this is why you hear so many entrepreneurs, they're like, oh, if I would have known how hard it was going to be when I started, I probably never would have started. That's why you hear that so often, because it's true. A lot of people don't realize how hard it is and how long it's going to take to actually get what you want. This is why you hear that whole thing, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success, because it's 100% true. And 10 years, I mean, that's like pretty quick as well. It's more like decades, really. It's not 10 years. It's like, okay, 20 years, 30 years. It takes a really, really long time to actually get to where you want to be. And because it takes so long, what happens is you just give up. Like, you expect it to last maybe a year. Like, a lot of people are like, okay, if I do a lot of work, maybe in a year, then I'll be good to go, right? And so they think it's only going to last a year. When a year happens and they look back, they're like, oh, for some reason I'm not getting traction or whatever. It's not really working. Oh, I must be doing something wrong. Oh, this thing is wrong. Whatever. They think everything's wrong. And in reality, they just completely underestimated how long it's going to take to get what they want. And when they underestimate that, they just stop. They give up. So, like, imagine you're running a marathon, right? So what is a marathon? 26 miles or something like that? Or I think it's 26 miles. But imagine you're running a marathon, right? And you know it's going to take you 26 miles, all right? So your training and everything is going to be about 26 miles. I mean, you're going to train to run 26 miles, everything, right? On the other hand, imagine if you didn't know that a marathon was 26 miles. Imagine if in your brain you thought the marathon was 1 mile. And maybe you're like, okay, it might be 2 miles. So imagine if that's what you did in your brain. What would happen? You're sitting there running. You're like, whew, all right, I'm tired. Whew, all right. And then all of a sudden a mile comes. You're like, all right, where's the finish line? Huh. You're wondering, like, where's the finish line? And then you go a little bit further. You're like, all right. So now you stop. Like, after a little bit over a mile, you're like, huh, am I doing something wrong here? Where's the finish line? And so you start walking a little bit. Like, you're no longer jogging at this point. You're like, it's a mile. Like, let me check my phone. Did I run a mile? Yes, it's a mile. Where's the finish line? And so then maybe some people, they're sitting there walking. They're like, maybe it's 2 miles, okay? So then they start jogging again. Like, okay, let me go another mile real quick. Like, what? At 2 miles. And they're like, where's the finish line? There's still no finish line. Oh, man, everyone's wrong. That program that taught me how to run, it's wrong. Everyone's wrong. And so that's what happened to you when you're building your business, if you underestimate how long it's going to take and how hard it's going to be. And so on the other hand, if you expect 26 miles, you're just going to understand it. You're going to be like, all right, 26 miles, cool. And so you'll understand it. And so the same goes with the speaking, to where those are probably the two biggest things. The one is book gigs for me. If you're in that mindset, you have to get out of that mindset ASAP. I cannot stress this enough. The longer you are in that mindset, the less likely you're going to get booked. In fact, you'll never get booked if you're in that mindset. That's just a fact, because people who are in that mindset, they just don't do any work, literally do no work whatsoever. And so they're in that mindset. It's the wrong mindset that you're in. Then there's the whole thing of it takes longer than you think, and it's harder than you think. And so this brings me to the successful speakers, okay? So the successful speakers are pretty much the reverse, right? Well, successful speakers, like everyone, also underestimate what it takes to get what they want. Everyone underestimates what it takes to accomplish the thing that they want. And it doesn't matter how successful you are in anything, all right? I have a friend doing 8 figures out here, and he asked me about speaking. He's like, hey, I want to speak like at events and stuff. He's like, I want to do some speaking and everything. I want to get like paid to speak. And so I was telling him like, okay, yeah, I mean, I can show you what to do and everything, but I'm telling you right now, it's going to be a lot harder than you think. And you will have to hire someone, and you probably want to put them through my program, and then I'll train them to actually do it. But because he definitely doesn't have time to actually do outreach or anything like that himself. So I was telling him like, you want to hire someone for sure, and then I'll train them to do the stuff. And so he thought, just like everyone else, he thought, all right, I just got to contact a couple people and then I'll get booked, especially because he's doing 8 figures, right? He's like, man, I'm the bomb. Like, I already got a really good business. I'm good to go. Shoot. I mean, all these other scrubs, these wannabe speakers, I mean, whatever. I got 8 figures, right? And so he already thought like it wasn't going to take him that long. But I told him like, it doesn't matter. Like it simply doesn't matter how much money you're making in your other business or whatever. You're literally starting from scratch when you're speaking, and it's going to take you a long time. And so that's like the difference. Everyone underestimates how long it's going to take, no matter how successful you are when you're starting something new. The difference, though, is that the unsuccessful ones, they simply just give up. I mean, after a while, they just give up. The successful ones, they're like, okay, I underestimated what it takes. I'll just keep going, right? And so it's like, let's go back to the marathon thing. So the unsuccessful guys, they say, all right, a marathon, 26 miles. And by the way, I'm hoping a marathon's 26 miles, because if it's not, I'm going to look pretty dumb, but I'm hoping a marathon's 26 miles. So it's like, let's say the marathon, the unsuccessful ones say, all right, I got to run a mile, maybe 2 miles, okay? And then after a mile, 2 miles, they're like, what the heck? Something's wrong here. And then they give up. The successful ones, they do the same thing. They're like, okay, a mile, 2 miles, maybe 3 miles. You know what? I'm underestimating what it takes. Maybe 3 miles. You know what? I'm really underestimating what it takes. It's probably 5 miles, to be honest. So that's what successful speakers do, or successful people in general. That's what they do. They'll underestimate it by a little bit more, but they're still underestimating it by a lot. And so they'll say maybe 5 miles. And so they're going. After a mile, they're like, where's the finish line? I don't know. Okay, let me go another mile. All right, 2 miles. Where's the finish line? Okay, well, I'll just probably 3 miles. And they'll go, okay, well, wow, still no finish line? That's weird. And then they hit 5 miles. They're like, okay, where's the finish line? Like, all right. And then they just keep going, right? So it's like they just don't give up. They're like, okay, well, 5 miles hit. All right, I'll just keep going. And they just keep going. And so that's like the little difference in terms of underestimating it. But everybody underestimates it, no matter how successful you are, no matter what. Everyone underestimates it, no matter what. And so this is why I tell people you have to run off your own fuel. Like, no matter what you're doing, whether you're creating content, whether you want to do outreach, no matter what you're doing, you have to run off your own fuel in the beginning, especially because you always underestimate it, and you underestimate it, and then you're burning out of the fuel, and then bam, there comes the moment when you underestimated it and you're like, so now you got to just run off your own fuel. You're like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep going until it actually happens. This is where the whole 50 Cent saying, get rich or die trying, I really like that saying, because it's kind of like you either succeed or you're going to die. So it's like, you basically give yourself no other option but to succeed. So even if you think it's going to take you a year or 2 years and it doesn't, let's say you do it for a year, 2 years, and still you see nothing, you're like, you know what? I'm going to get rich or die trying. So you go on for another year, then another year, and another year. You just keep going. It's like 10 years later, you just keep going. 20 years later, you just keep going. You're like, you know what? I'm going to keep going until I'm freaking 90 years old. I'm on my deathbed and stuff. So that's kind of the small difference in terms of that thing. So now when it comes to the successful speakers, successful people in anything, first thing that they do is they get the know-how. So there's a lack of knowledge that you have when you're trying to do anything new. There's always a lack of knowledge, and you can go on YouTube, whatever, but you got to get the know-how in the beginning. You have to know how to do the thing that you want to do. And this is why you hear so many people say you need a mentor, you need a mentor, you need a mentor. I got tired of people saying this. Like, I heard it so many times, like, dude, this freaking mentor stuff is stupid. Stop telling me I need a mentor, right? I got tired of hearing it, but it's true. I mean, it's 100% true, because all the mentor does is they're essentially telling you, here's what's going to happen. Like they anticipate everything for you. That's what the mentor does. The mentor sees the marathon. They see the 26 miles that you have to run, right? And so you've never run the marathon before, right? And so they know, okay, after a mile or 2 miles, you're going to like be really, really tired. So they're going to tell you that, like, okay, after a little bit, you're going to be really, really tired, but just keep going. Then after you go a little bit longer, you're going to be really thirsty, and your legs are going to really start hurting. And then when you're like really, when you're really there, I mean, your legs are going to be burning. You're going to want to give up, and the mentor is going to help you anticipate that. And so in your brain, you're going to say, okay, cool, I got it, right? And remember, the mentor can tell you, oh, it's actually 26 miles, not 1 mile. And so that's why everyone keeps saying the whole mentor thing. And that's why the know-how comes into play. And this is why I tell a lot of people when you're trying to build your business, your speaking business, first things first. I know a lot of people think that I say to join the Speak Pro Academy just because I want them to buy the program, which, I mean, I do. But to be honest, I just know how hard it is and how long it's going to be if they don't. I just know that for a fact, because I know that when you build your website, you're going to build it wrong. Like, I just know that for a fact. Every speaker says, I have a website. Here's a link to my website. And I say, nope, you got to redo it. It's wrong. Like, there's so much that you have to change. It's wrong. But if you have the know-how, you know how to fix it. So you know, like, okay, well, the images, I got to change the images up like this. I got to change the text like this. So you know how to change it. So the first thing that successful people do is they seek the know-how. And I notice this with a lot of successful people is when they say, okay, I want to learn tennis, I want to learn poker, I want to learn whatever. One of the first things they tend to do is they tend to actually, this depends on how much money they make, but they tend to actually get a mentor, someone who can actually say, here's how you do this thing. Like, here's how you play poker and all that. There's a guy inside this high rise. So like when I first started doing some of the boxing stuff in the morning, right? I'm not doing boxing to actually like box for a living or whatever. I just did it for the cardio. But I thought to myself, you know what? Let me at least do a couple things right so I don't freaking sprain my wrist when I punch or something like that. And so I went on YouTube and I started just looking at videos like how to punch right or how to punch fast and how to punch hard and like footwork. And I started looking at things like that. And I didn't realize how much detail went into this stuff. I was like, dang, like it was like an insane amount of detail. So I'm like watching it. I'm like, okay, cool. Then this guy in the high rise, he's a fitness trainer, and I didn't know he did boxing for like 3 years. We were talking, and I was like, yeah, I just got this new boxing thing. I'm doing it for cardio. He's like, dude, I've been doing boxing for like 3 years. I was like, dude, you should come upstairs and show me some stuff. So he came up literally for 30 minutes. I learned more in 30 minutes, and I did research into all these YouTube videos and everything because it was like small details. I'm like, okay, I'm doing this. And he's like, all right, move your legs like this. No, oh, you got to punch like this and twist your hips. And it was like small details that he was showing me. And I'm thinking like, dang, in 30 minutes, he showed me more than all the videos that I watched on YouTube. And so it's like small details in terms of the know-how that you have to get. That's what the successful people do at first. After that, then it comes down to this. And this is the thing that I don't know if this story is true or not, but this is the story that I always tell people with this. There was, they were at like a banquet, like a dinner banquet or something, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, and they're sitting at the same table. And the host, he says, I guess it was a smaller event. The host is like, all right, so we're going to kind of go around and I want people to kind of say, what's the thing that made you the most successful or something like that? Like what's the characteristic trait that made you the most successful? And so when it came to Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, they said at the same time, they were like, focus. Like one word, they were just focus. And they said at the same time, and it's true, like it's 100% true. The amount of focus that you have to engage in to get what you want is insane. Like this is one of the things where I'm like, I don't think you realize how focused you need to be. I tell people this, and I'm like, I don't think you realize how focused you got to be. Everyone's like, I got to do this and this and this. In the beginning, I think that the difference between me and all the other guys, like all my other friends, entertainers and speakers, like in the beginning was the level of focus that I had compared to them. So they were doing things like, let me write a book. Let me do this. Let me do whatever. They were doing all sorts of stuff. All I did literally was send out cold emails. I did nothing else. I didn't care about a book. I didn't care about a webinar. I didn't care about anything. All I literally did from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed was send out cold emails. I woke up, sent out some emails, and then in between there, I'd go to the gym, eat some food, stuff like that. But all I really did was send out cold emails, and that's it. What you see nowadays with speakers, in fact, if you guys go into any one of these speaker groups inside of Facebook or whatever, go in there and ask people, how do you build your speaking business? How do you, what do you do when you're starting, whatever? People are going to tell you all sorts of things. Write a book, create a webinar, create your website, and do some outreach, do cold calls, cold emails, do, what else is there? Webinars, create an online program, build your brand, create some content, create a podcast, make sure you have a podcast. Everyone's going to tell you all sorts of stuff. And that's what a lot of speakers do. A lot of speakers like, oh, I got to write a book. I got to create content. I got to create videos. I got to create a podcast. I got to do some interviews with other people, some JVs. I don't know what else. But everyone's like, they have all these things that they think they need to do. In reality, you have to get to the power of one. And if you guys haven't read the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, make sure you read it. It's Gary Keller's the guy who built Keller Williams, the real estate company. And so they wrote a book called The One Thing, because if you know about the 80-20 rule, the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, is basically 80% of your results come from 20% of your activities. So most of the results that you get in life, in anything, come from the small things that you're doing, just a couple things that you're doing. But what Gary Keller did is he's like, it's not 80-20, it's 99-1. He's like, 99% of your results come from the one thing that you're really doing, the one thing that's the most important thing. And that's why I tell people, like, dude, you got to get to a level of focus where you're so tunnel visioned that it doesn't make sense to people. Like, it just doesn't make sense. You're like, it's not that other things don't work. Everything works. Cold calling, cold emailing, webinars, building your email list with Facebook, YouTube, all of it works. You just have to pick one to do first. That's what you have to do. Let's see what he said. All right, so Geraldine, I think I said that right. Geraldine, all right. So he said, at what point do you know that you're doing, at what point do you know that what you're doing with the cold email is actually right? Because I know we have to trust and keep going, but if indeed the approach is wrong, okay, so then I just keep using it over and over. That is actually a hard one. So it's basically like, at what point do you know when to stop and adjust versus just keep going because you're just not doing enough? Man, that is insanely hard. That is one of the reasons why everyone tells you to get a mentor, right? Because when you don't know if what you're doing is right or wrong, or if you should keep going, when you don't know that, a lot of times you'll give up, or maybe you're doing the right things, but you're not doing enough of it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm sending out cold emails or whatever. I'm doing the right things. I'm doing it the right way, but you're not seeing the results yet because it's taken a longer time than you thought. And then you end up switching. You're like, well, cold emailing doesn't work. Let me create some content, and you just switch, right? And so I remember this guy, the way he described it, I don't have like a paper or anything, but so imagine there's like three things, A, B, C, okay? And so imagine here, A is cold emailing, B is podcasting, and C is webinars or whatever, right? So all of them work, right? But what happens is this. So imagine the finish line is out here for all of them, for cold emailing, for podcasting, for webinars. The finish line is here. And then what happens is you do cold emailing. So you're here with cold emailing. You go. And then you're like, I'm not seeing any results. This probably isn't working. So you stop. And then you're like, let me switch to podcasting. So you switch to podcasting. You start over, right? You switch to podcasting. You're like, let me do some podcasting. You go. A year, 2 years later, you still don't see results. You're like, all right, let me switch. And then you switch to webinars. You go up. That still doesn't work either. You can't get that to work. And then you're like, let me go back to cold email. This guy, Benji Bruce, talks about cold email. Let me go back here. So you're kind of like back over here. You're not really where you started, but you're kind of back over here. Then you're like, let me go. And so it's like you're splitting your focus, and you don't know that the finish line is here. This is where the mentor comes into play. The mentor says, no, the finish line is way out here. You don't realize it. And so a lot of times people quit even though they're doing the right thing. All right. And there is no real answer. There is no black and white answer in terms of here's exactly when you know when to stop. Like here's when you know that what you're doing is wrong and that you should stop at this moment. When you see this thing, stop. There is no way to tell. There's absolutely no way to know 100%. But the mentor, on the other hand, he says like, no, you're sending out the cold emails wrong. You're doing it wrong. You need to switch like this and all that. So that's where the mentor comes into play. If, on the other hand, it's just you, like let's say you have no mentor, right? So this is actually, it happened to me to where with me, I didn't have a mentor. And this was only because when I started, there wasn't all this content that there is now. Like there wasn't Facebook and all that. It was back in the day when MySpace was the #1 social media thing. It was like one of the only social media things. And I was for sure Facebook would never beat MySpace. Like I was 100% sure. I was like, Facebook beat MySpace? Yeah, right. So it was back then, right? So there wasn't all this stuff that was out there. So I didn't have a mentor to kind of tell me how long it was going to take or anything. So I had to kind of figure it out myself. And what happened in the beginning is I sat down and I said to myself, does cold emailing work? That's all I said. I said, does this work? All right. And in the beginning, I said, does cold calling work? I mean, I started out with cold calling. I switched to cold emailing. But basically, I said, does cold email, cold calling, does it work? That was the question I asked myself. The answer is yes, 100% it works. So I knew I was doing the right thing. At that moment, it was just a matter of how do I get it to work? That's the only other question I had to ask myself. So you simply have to ask yourself, does this work? And if the answer is yes, then it's a matter of how do I get it to work? And this is where the power of the one comes into play. So what I said is I know cold emailing works, 100% certainty. I know it works because if it didn't work, there wouldn't be industries on cold emailing. There wouldn't be software on cold email. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry just for cold emailing, right? So I knew it worked. I knew other people used it and all this. I knew it worked, all right? And so then I said, if for some reason it's not working for me, it's because there's something I'm doing wrong. All right. And speaking of that, actually, that's another really big difference between the successful speakers and everybody else. Successful speakers take 100% responsibility for their own life. All the unsuccessful speakers, unsuccessful people in general, blame everybody and everything else. You'll notice this when people buy a program, when people do anything and it doesn't work, they're like, that thing didn't work. It's like, no, you didn't work, okay? And so I took 100% responsibility. I knew that if my cold email wasn't working, it was because there was something I was doing wrong. It wasn't because cold emailing didn't work. It was because I couldn't get it to work. And so that's the thing that you have to really think about. Like, one, does this thing work? And then how do I get it to work? And this is where the power of one comes into play. So remember the finish line is here. You have, let's say, cold emailing, you have podcasting, you have webinars. All of them work, okay? But let's say you choose cold emailing. You're like, I'm going to do cold emailing. And so you're like, okay, I know this thing works, so let me just keep going. For some reason, it's not working right now. It's not working, but I'm going to keep going, figure it out. It's not working. All right, I'm going to keep figuring it out. You just keep figuring it out as you go, right? So you just keep figuring out, what are you doing wrong? This is the hardest thing to do, is to figure out what are you doing wrong. And this is where know-how comes into play. Know-how and the mentor thing comes into play. So when you do something wrong, you have to figure out, what the hell am I doing wrong? Like, I know cold email works. What am I doing wrong? Why are people not responding to this thing? Like, why is this not working? One of the things that we tell the speakers in the Speak Pro Academy is, with the cold emailing, you have to figure out, like, what are you doing wrong? Because in the beginning, you're always going to do something wrong. Like, there's no doubt. You can't start something and just be a pro instantly. So the way you figure out what you're doing wrong in the beginning is you buy a software like Yesware. Yesware is going to tell you what you're doing wrong. So Yesware, essentially, it is say, here's how many people opened your email. Here's how many people replied to the email. Here's how many people clicked on the link in the email. Yesware is not an autoresponder, by the way. There's a huge difference between autoresponders like Aweber and all that versus Yesware. Autoresponders like Aweber, they're inbound. Yesware is outbound. Okay, there's a huge difference. But basically, Yesware tells you like, did they open it? Did they click on the link to your website? Did they reply to it? So it tells you that. That lets you know what you're doing wrong. So if you know, let's say you're sending out cold emails, you're cold emailing all these companies or whatever. Hey, I'm the greatest speaker in the world. Hire me for $1 million. In fact, I'll give you a discount. I'll only do it for $900,000, right? So you're cold emailing them. And let's say you see that nobody, or let's say you send out 100 emails and only 5 of them opened up your email. What does that tell you? That tells you your subject line is wrong. So it tells you like, hey, I'm doing something wrong. My subject line sucks. So now you have to change up the subject line. On the other hand, let's say you send out 100 emails and it says, okay, out of the 100, 80 of them open the email. And out of 80 of them, 2 of them clicked on a link to your website. Well, what does that tell you? That tells you that the pitch, your email pitch is bad. It says, okay, you got them to open the email, but whatever you said in that email, it sucks so bad that almost none of them clicked on the link to your website, right? And so that's what you do. You have to get the feedback, right? So that's kind of how you're kind of figuring that stuff out. And that's what the mentor does as well. The mentor literally sees it instantly. He's like, oh, here's what you're doing wrong. So he just sees it instantly, right? So let's see. Let me scroll back up. All right, so he said, Benji, you ever do podcasts via Facebook Live? Nope. All right, so let's see, would you? All right, okay, well, yeah, I'll be on a podcast. I don't mind being on a podcast. All right, cool. Yeah, so if that's what you're asking, yeah, I'll be on a podcast. Just send me a message. All right, so let's see. He said, that makes sense. Is there a number of time after which it's time to stop then? Or a number of positive replies or interests. Okay, so if you know that this thing works, there's never a time when you should stop doing it, okay? So if you know that it works, like let's say cold emailing. Cold emailing works. Cold emailing works. Cold calling works. Webinars work. All of it works, right? Well, almost all of it works. If you know that it works, it's just a matter of if it's not working, it's just because you're doing something wrong. So you have to get help in terms of doing it right. That's what you have to really determine. And this is why a lot of speakers don't get booked, because they don't see what they're doing wrong. You can't see it. Like, they're too close to the problem. It's like all you have to do to get booked on a stage is you have to have a good website, and you have to send out, you have to do outreach. You have to either call someone or send an email. If you do that, you can get $30,000 gigs. That's just a simple fact, okay? Those are the only 2 things you have to do. And so if for some reason you're not getting booked, it's because you're messing up in one of those 2. Either your website sucks and or your actual sequence to pitching events suck, okay? So it's one of those 2. And this is where you have to figure out, like, what am I doing wrong? And honestly, this is why it took me so long to get booked in the beginning, just because no one was there to tell me what I was doing wrong. And there wasn't like really good software like Yesware way back in the day, or maybe there was, I just couldn't afford it, whatever. So it's like, this is one of the things where you have to either have someone take a look at what you're doing and say, here's what you're doing wrong, fix it. You have to either do that, or you have to go read a ton, watch a ton of videos, get a ton of knowledge, and fix it yourself. That's the one that's going to take you the longest. So like, if you have to go back and you have to say, all right, let me read some books on how to pitch, on cold email, persuasion, that's going to take you a lot of time, because you got to read stuff, watch stuff, and all that. It's going to take you a lot of time to do that. And then you simply don't know what to fix. Like that's the problem. The first thing is like, well, what do I fix? I know cold emailing works, but it's not working for me. Why is it not working? Is it because the subject line sucks? Is it because my sequence sucks? Like, why is it not working? You just don't know. So you have to read books. You have to get the know-how to figure out, well, what's not working? Like, what the heck is not working? That's going to take you a while. All right. And so that's the hard thing is to determine that. Let's see. He said, I've sent out 400 emails first, more if you count follow-ups and replies and such, but haven't booked one single engagement. Got a couple interests where I'd have to pay, a couple interests where I'd speak for free. So I'm interested for next year, but nothing solid yet. Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. 400 emails is a blip on the screen of what it takes to actually get booked. especially in the beginning. I sent out 400 emails in 2 days. Like back in the day, in 2 days, I would send that out, right? I sent out, or maybe, all right, maybe like 3 days, really. But I sent that out in just a few days, 400 emails. In order to get booked in the beginning, you're sending out thousands. Once again, Geraldine, I think I'm saying your name right. Geraldine, once again, remember a marathon, 26 miles. You are sending 400 emails. You're half a mile in. You're not even at the mile yet. So you think you're doing something wrong. You think that you've hit the finish line, but you're not even at the half mile mark. You're barely at the half mile mark. And so that's what you're doing wrong. Once again, everyone underestimates what it takes. Everybody. This is why it absolutely amazes me when people are like, I sent out 10 emails and I haven't gotten booked. I'm like, dude, how about 10,000 emails? Then come talk to me. All right. And so that's what I mean by you're underestimating what it takes. You think you're doing a lot, but you're not doing enough to get what you want. This is with everybody, every single person. Ask any successful person, how long did it take you? How long were you really working on this thing? They'll tell you like, dude, about 20 years. Like that's literally what they'll say, about 20 years. It's like if a successful person says, oh, it only took me like 10 years to do it, you'll be like, dang, that was fast. Like that should be your response. Like, dang, you did that fast. And it's just because, like I said, everybody underestimates what it takes. And so that's the first thing. You're underestimating how many emails you have to send out, okay? And so that's number one. Then on top of that, Geraldine, this is one of the things that we do. I always tell all speakers in the Speak Pro Academy, post your conversations inside of the Speak Pro Academy, because we're going to go over exactly what you're saying in those conversations. And this is where there was a speaker, there's a speaker inside Speak Pro Academy, and he was having a hard time in terms of just like getting booked in general. Like he was sending out a pretty good amount of emails, but they weren't booking him. And so I said, post the conversations in there. So he started posting the conversations, and I said, that's it. He didn't sound like an in-demand speaker. So he would pitch them, and he would say like, can you, what was it? He'd be like, can you please consider me for your events? Or he would say things like that. And I'm like, look, an in-demand speaker doesn't talk like that. You have to talk like an in-demand speaker when you're pitching them. It's more along the line, like an in-demand speaker is like, hey man, I'm so booked up, it's ridiculous. Like, to be honest, even though I sent you an email to where I want to speak at your event, I'm probably going to get booked for that date. So it's like, that's the attitude of an in-demand speaker. That's why my friend Rich, the entertainer back in the day, that's why he was booked up all the time, because the way he came across was just like insanely in demand. And so little things like that inside of your email pitch is what you're probably doing wrong. And I know it's like you're probably doing that wrong. You're not sounding like you're in demand. Your website may not be as good as you think it is. And then on top of that, your sequence for the email pitch isn't where it should be. Okay, so your sequence for the pitch has to probably change as well. So there's a few things that you may be doing wrong with that in terms of just like getting booked in general. But this is like, once again, this is one of the biggest reasons why so many people fail in everything, like not just speaking, but just everything. People just completely underestimate what it takes. They don't realize it's 26 miles and they're not even at mile number 1 yet, right? And so when you don't realize how long it's going to take, you naturally start changing and switching from cold email to podcasting to videos to all sorts of different stuff. And so this is why you have to get back to the power of one. So you want to think along the lines of the one thing that you have to focus on. So do you want to do outreach? Or let's say your one thing is Google AdWords. You're like, you know what? I'm going to do Google AdWords because I know Google AdWords works in order to get booked, because the way people hire speakers is they'll go to Google, they'll type in motivational speakers in Florida, and then if you pop up right there and your website is really great, then you'll get booked. Like, that's how speakers get booked, right? So if you know that works, you're like, okay, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to keep trying it until it works for me. The problem with that is it can be expensive in order to get that right. I found that out firsthand. But that's essentially what you have to think about. Okay, so let's see. You said only 400. Go for 1,000 or more. and it's a holiday. Yeah, so Nick basically said the same thing. Yep. So did you? All right, so you said 99% of the cold email game is mental. Yeah, so Griff is 100% right. So you said, I'm at a point where I'm learning from the process of what is working and what is not. I won't lie, it's frustrating because I've been doing it for a while now, but I know that I'm getting better at my craft. Yeah. So what Griff said, this is what I talk about a lot with the Speak Pro Academy is sales in general it's a mental game. This is why sales has a high turnover rate. Like in any industry, sales just has a high turnover rate because it's purely mental. And what happens is I tell all the speakers this. I'm like, okay, what's going to happen is you're going to get excited at first. You're like, all right, I'm going to book some gigs. I got all this new knowledge. I'm going to get some gigs. I'm going to start sending out some cold emails. Got my CRM set up. Yesware set up. I got all this set up. You're good to go. You're like, oh man, boom, boom. Got 400 events that I can start contacting. Cool, bam. You start sending out the emails. And then all of a sudden nobody replies or very few people reply. Or you're like, huh. And you start to slow down. Like, remember, you're 26 miles and you're running, you hit the mile mark, and then you're like, where's the finish line? Huh. Like, nobody's responding. Nobody's like, all right, let's book them. And so you slow down. You go from running to now you're walking, like you're walking a little fast. And this is where now it's going to take you a lot longer because remember, imagine if you ran the whole 26 miles, you're going to get there, you're going to get to the end really fast. On the other hand, imagine if you ran 1 mile and then you start slowing down, you start just walking. Now it's going to take you even longer. Now you're going to get even more confused. You're going to be like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what the heck? You're going to get even more confused. And this is what happens with speakers. Like they're doing cold emails, cold calls or whatever, and then it's not working because they don't realize how much they need to do. And they're like, why is this not working? So they slow down. Instead of contacting, let's say 100 people a day, they go from 100 a day to 20 a day. They're like, what am I doing wrong here? And they're like cleaning the windows. So I'm like seeing stuff outside here. So it's like, they're like, what am I doing wrong? And so they slow down from 100 emails a day to 50 a day to 20 a day. And now you're really screwing yourself because you're not contacting enough people. And so then when you don't contact enough people, now it just extends that period of time. All right. And so, yeah, if you guys hear noises, they're cleaning the windows. So that's why it really is a mental game. And it's a frustrating thing. Like, you're naturally going to get frustrated in the beginning. All right. So let's see. Cool. All right. So yeah, expect the frustration. What else? So let me get back to the one thing real quick. So the one thing is, I did this with everything. So after I mastered the outreach process, like I said, I did that for a minimum of 10 years, just reaching out to events. That's all I did to get booked, just reach out to events. I knew like Google AdWords worked and I tested it a little bit, but once again, I just still focused on outreach. Then when I started doing the online stuff, at that moment, I wish I would have done my one thing. I wish I would have really focused, but I didn't in the beginning. Like I did just the same thing everyone else does. I was like, oh, let me do a podcast. Let me create some videos. Let me do a webinar. Let me do some JVs. That's what I did in the beginning. Eventually, I was like, you know what? Forget this. I'm not doing any JVs. I'm not doing any webinars. I'm not doing any of this stuff. I'm going to do this one thing. I'm going to focus on this one thing until I hit like $500,000. And then bam, it's like that. That's kind of what you're doing. To where it's like, I'm going to do this one thing. I'm only going to do the podcast. I'm going to build my podcast until I'm making $250,000 off this thing. Once I make $250,000, then I'll start doing some videos. Once I do $250,000 off that, then I'll do this, right? So that's what you're doing. You basically set a goal on it. You say, I'm going to do outreach until I hit $250,000 from speaking gigs. Once I do that, then I'm going to switch over to creating a Google AdWords campaign or whatever. So that's what you have to do. And so this is why so many speakers fail, and you can see the difference between the successful guys and everyone else, because everyone else, they're just doing too many things. They're doing webinars, they're writing a book, they're trying to do some cold calls, cold emails, their podcasts, JVs, and whatever else there is. They're just doing too many things, and that's why they fail, because people don't realize the level of detail that you need to go into in order to succeed at something. So let's say you want to build a YouTube channel, right? You want to do some videos. Well, you have to master the ability to create really great headlines, like headlines to a point where people see the headline, they're like, damn, I got to watch this video. What is this thing about? Elon Musk smoking weed? What? And so you got to master the ability to create the headlines. And that comes down to copywriting. You got to study copywriting. You got to get really good at copywriting. That's going to take you a long time just to master the headline, okay? So that's the headline. Then you got to get really good at creating the thumbnails, the YouTube thumbnails, because those are the first two things that people see is the headline and the thumbnails. So now you got to basically become a graphic designer. You have to, whether you use phone apps, whether you use Photoshop on your computer, whatever it is, you have to get really good at designing the thumbnails. Now that's going to take some time, right? Just like any graphic designer would tell you, like in the beginning, I sucked at graphic design. Now I'm pretty good, right? So those two things, you got to master copywriting, you got to master the thumbnails. Now you got to master the video. Now you got to master like how you present on the video, how you come across on the video. You got to capture their attention, keep the attention, convert the attention. You got to do all that. That's just for the videos. So if you're sitting there, you got to master copywriting, graphic design, presentation skills just for a freaking YouTube channel. And so you got to master that thing. On the other hand, if you're like, oh, I'm gonna do that, plus I'm gonna do outreach, I'm gonna do all this stuff. Now you're just trying to master too many things all at once. And so that's why you have to think in terms of the power of one. And then real quick, I want to get to the speed of implementation. If there's one thing, focus is probably number one. Number two, I don't know, focus and this one, I don't know, they may be even, right? So focus, and then there's speed of implementation. Speed of implementation. Drill this into your head. Like, oh my goodness. People don't realize how long it takes to succeed. Remember that. And they're underestimating that time period. So, like I said, if you know it's 26 miles and the person who runs the fastest is going to get there to the end the fastest, that is speed of implementation. What I see with a lot of the unsuccessful speakers is they'll say things like, hey, I know I need to build a website. Like, I know I need a website. Like, what do I do to build a website? And I'll say, okay, buy the Divi theme. That's the theme I always recommend. Get WordPress, buy the Divi theme, and then go from there. I'll go back to their website a week later. Still nothing's happened. Absolutely nothing. They haven't uploaded. They haven't done anything whatsoever. I'm like, yeah, that person's not going to make it. Just because speed of implementation, right? And so on the other hand, the exact opposite of someone like that is someone like Maggie, right? So Maggie's inside Speak Pro Academy. Maggie she didn't really know anything about websites, none of that stuff. We did our website boot camp, right? And in the website boot camp, I made it really easy for speakers to build their website. Within 2 days, Maggie got her website up. She literally didn't know how to do anything with websites, WordPress, nothing. She spent like all day, every day working on the website, and she got her website up in 2 days, right? And that's speed of implementation. From the moment you know what you should do to the time you do it is speed of implementation. Most people procrastinate. They're just like, oh, I know I should get a website. I know I should do outreach or whatever. And then they procrastinate. And the way they procrastinate is by planning. They're like, okay, I know I should get a really good website. Let me research some graphic designers. Let me research some web designers. Okay. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, they're still researching, still planning. What should I put on my website? Like what pictures, what videos, what text? And then a week later, 2 weeks later, nothing's changed whatsoever. On the other hand, someone like Maggie, she didn't ask herself any of those questions. Well, she did, but later on, it was like, okay, I know first thing that I need to do is get the WordPress. So, all right, let me go do that. All right, where's WordPress? Bam, got that. Okay, I know I should get the Divi theme. Where do I get the Divi? Let me go buy that thing. Okay, we got that. And I know, so it's like, it was just real quick, right? And so that's the biggest thing is, that planning, the way you know you're procrastinating is by planning and researching, right? And so this is why I like Jeff Bezos when he said, basically, what was it? He was like, if we're planning for more than 15 minutes, we're wasting our time, right? And I'm sure they plan for more than 15 minutes, but basically what he was saying is like, so many people, they sit down and they plan and they research for so long and they just get nothing done. On the other hand, if you just do things, you're going to mess up. Like as you do things, you're going to mess up, but you'll be able to fix it, right? So it's like, imagine once again the marathon. You got 26 miles. And the person, imagine there's two people. One of them's planning. One of them's like, okay, all right, so how am I going to best run the marathon? I know that it's 26 miles. I know that my legs are going to start hurting around mile number 6. It's going to start hurting. So how do I make sure my legs aren't hurting all that much? Okay, so maybe I can do this. Okay, well, maybe I can like put Vaseline on my feet so I don't get blisters. And okay, and they're planning and all this stuff. And then the second person, it's like, they're just running. They're like, oh, snap, I'm just running, right? And then all of a sudden, like at mile 6, they're like, oh, dang, my legs hurt. And they're like, all right, what do I do about this? And they change up whatever. They're like, all right, let me change this up. Now they get their legs working again. Okay, cool. They start running. Oh, dang, I got blisters on my feet. Shoot, I should have let me put some Vaseline on. So they're at mile 10 while the other person's way back here is still trying to plan stuff that they haven't even started. They're just like, all right, and so then this, and maybe, I don't want to eat because then I'm going to get a cramp. They're still planning. So the planning stage is almost that's how you know you're procrastinating. You have to simply get to a point where you're almost not thinking. Like, this is why you see so many dumb successful people. And I mean that. Like, you see so many people who are successful at what they do. They make a lot of money, but they're dumb. If you actually talk to them, like, it's like they don't know anything. And the reason is because they may not know anything, but they just did stuff. And when it came up in terms of, oh, I'm doing this wrong, they just did something else. They're just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Let me just go do stuff, right? And so that's all they did. A perfect example. So if you guys go to, let me show you. I'm sure you guys watched that movie, Catch Me If You Can, the one with Leonardo DiCaprio. What was that guy? Abigail. All right, so you guys should watch this. So watch this video here, this talk with Frank. So Frank, he's the guy in the movie of the Catch Me If You Can movie. Basically, he was a con artist. He was a con artist, like a really slick one. It was pretty funny. And in this video, what happens is a lot of people think a con artist like him plans a lot of stuff. And what he was saying, he's like, I didn't plan 99.9% of what I did. I just did it, and I just went from there. He's like, I would just go up, like he impersonated a pilot, and he was like, he didn't know how to get like a uniform or anything, so he just called up the airline. And he even said in the video, he's like, I didn't know what I was going to say to him. Like, what most people would have done is they would have said, okay, I'm a con artist. Let me write out my script. Let me make sure I say the right things. That way I can persuade them to give me a suit, my pilot suit and stuff. They would plan it and everything. All Frank did is he just literally just said, let me just call up this airline. And then they answered like, hey, this is Delta so-and-so. And yeah, he's like, oh yeah. So I'm sorry, but I lost my uniform, my pilot uniform, and how do I get a new one? You're like, oh, well, what you need to do is this. Okay, well, and he just went off the cuff. He just improvised. He literally just speed of implementation, because he knew that. Let's say he called him up. He says, hey, I lost my pilot suit. How do I get a new one? They're like, are you even real? Like, you're not even real, sir. We know you're a scam. We know you're a con artist. He just would have hung up. He just went, okay, whatever. He would have called a different airline. Hey, and then he would have learned from that thing. He would have been like, okay, the reason why they thought I was a con artist is because maybe I said this or something. He would have learned from it. Then he would have called up another airline. Bam, he would have done it again. Whereas the other person, they would have sat there and planned forever, and then they wouldn't have accomplished anything. So that's the biggest thing, is the speed of implementation part. He said, so many dumb successful people. Yeah, it's true. So let's see. Any other final questions? You said, were you specific on who you're reaching out to? I've been emailing universities, conferences, corporations, universities. Yeah, so Yeah, so Geraldine, that actually is. So that comes down to the power of the one that I was talking about. So remember how I said that the power of the one. So let's say you say to yourself, I know I'm going to reach out to events. Like that's how I'm going to get books, by reaching out, cold emailing events. I'm not going to cold call, I'm not going to do Google AdWords. I'm going to send out cold emails. Now, once again, you don't realize how focused you need to be. You have to say, I'm not going to cold email everybody. I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to focus on colleges. Right. And so you focus on the market. Now, in the beginning, you may not know like which market, right? So if you don't know which market, then yeah, you just cold email people and you just see who responds to you. But if you say like, okay, I'm going to cold email colleges. Well, now because you make that decision, what do? Well, now your website is going to say the top college motivational speaker. And then the text on the website is going to say, you think your college students are going to be bored? Think again. And it's going to focus on that. On the other hand, if you go corporate, if you're like, I'm going to focus on corporate. Well, now what you do is you focus on what do companies want? It's like, okay, we're going to make you look good. It's a PG presentation. He's not going to cuss in the presentation. So now you're focusing on that on your website and everything. You're getting really, really focused, right? And so that's what you have to do. Conferences, I'll tell you right now, they're not going to pay you. So I'll just tell you right now. So conferences are really bad. You just won't get paid with conferences. And we talked about that yesterday. So if you want to watch the video, the Facebook Live from yesterday, you'll see why. But conferences, they just don't pay. But yeah, so you just want to get really focused. And like I said, in the beginning, you may not know. So something like companies and colleges, you can really pick between the two. You can say, you know what, I'm only going to go after companies, or I'm only going to go after colleges. Like that one, you can actually know. You can actually say, I'm only going to go after one or the other. On the other hand, let's say you say companies, right? Well, you don't know which industry is going to hire you the most, like sales organizations. So you don't know like which industry is going to hire you the most. So now you're kind of just contacting companies. Eventually you realize like, okay, sales industries hire me the most. And then you realize that insurance industries hire you the most. And they get like really focused like that. So that's kind of what you're doing there. She said, just got paid by a conference, $3K. Nice. Yeah, so Maggie, the one who just wrote, that was the Maggie that I was talking about with the website where speed of implementation. And like I said, I even emailed about her to where she didn't even join for like a month, and she just booked like 3 gigs pretty fast, because once again, it came down to speed of implementation, to where she knew like, okay, here's what I need to do. Let me go do it. And that was the thing. So speed of implementation, that probably, focus, speed of implementation. Yeah, I guess they're about the same, but speed of implementation is huge, and it's so big between the successful and unsuccessful speakers. For some reason, women tend to be better at it than men, and on top of that, immigrants tend to be better at it than everyone else, just because people are too comfortable, especially in the U.S. People are just comfortable, right? And so it's like when you know you're broke, like you know you have no money. That's an uncomfortable situation. You're homeless, whatever. It's uncomfortable as hell. You're like, I got to do something about this, right? So you do something about it. On the other hand, if you live in a house, so you may not be in a mansion or whatever, you just live in a normal house and you're not struggling for food, you're comfortable. And so you don't act fast. And this is why immigrants tend to come over to the U.S. and just destroy all these regular American entrepreneurs, just because immigrants, they're uncomfortable. They're like, I came over here with nothing. I got to do something to get something, right? And so that's what naturally happens. And so that's what happened with Maggie. Maggie's like, all right, well, I got to do something. And so then you just get that speed of implementation, and then it just becomes like a natural habit for you. And so that speed of implementation is huge. So nice work, Maggie, on that. She said, if you have book, podcast classes, and speaking engagements, which do you recommend focusing on first? There is no one to focus on first. It just comes down to what do you want to do first. And then, it's just what do you want to do first? And you have to think in terms of like, where is this going to end up? So that's what I always thought about. I always thought like, okay, if all I did was focus on getting speaking gigs in the college market, what would that look like in the future? What would it look like? So basically I'd be on a college circuit. I'd be doing all these colleges, be on a stage and all that, right? So I would picture that in my head. On the other hand, if I said, all right, let me just focus on podcasts, what would that look like? It would look something like this, not like high-rise thing, but it will look something like this. I got a microphone here, and then all I'm doing is creating the podcast. I'm just recording into the mic, and that's all I'd be doing all day, every day. I'd be sitting in a chair or whatever, all day, every day, recording. And so that's what I would be thinking of, and I would think, do I want to do that? Would I rather be sitting in a chair recording the podcast all the time, or would I rather be on stage, like speaking to a crowd all the time? There's no right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of which one do you want to do first. And then, like, if you can do both, but this is what I talked about in our time management bootcamp, is if you want to do both, you decide on one first and you set an end date. So, more like an end income level. So you say, I'm going to do speaking first. All right. So you say, first, I'm going to speak at colleges. And once I hit $100,000 in colleges, then I'll start my podcast. All right. That's what you do. Okay. So that's how you do it. You don't just say and it can be flipped, by the way. You can say, okay, I'm going to do the podcast. Once I hit 100,000 subscribers, then I'll do speaking or whatever. So that's kind of what you're doing there. So Geraldine say, I'm an immigrant. Yeah. So yeah, immigrants just tend to destroy regular just Americans, just because Americans are comfortable. So yeah, too comfortable. Like, I'll tell you right now, most of you right now, you're too comfortable, and it's really a state of mind that you have to be in. It's not how much money you make, right? It's just a state of mind that you have to be in. That's why Damon John created the book. You can see that guy outside. If he falls, then we got it recorded. So that's why Damon John wrote that book. What was it called? Like, Going from Broke or something like that. It was like broke or whatever, like got to act like you're broke. And it's because that's the state of mind that you have to be in, so you're not comfortable, so you have the speed of implementation, and so you have that level of focus that you need to have, okay? All right, so we are good to go on today. So we will talk tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific time, and we're going to go over some other stuff tomorrow. I didn't go over everything I wanted to today, but that's good. So let's see. She said it worked. My music career made it become Broadway conductor. Yep, cool. Yep, yeah, exactly. That power, focus, and speed of implementation, it's everything, man. And then really, really get out of that mindset of, I want someone to book gigs for me. If you're in that mindset, you are guaranteed to fail. Guaranteed 100%. You're guaranteed to fail. So get out of that mindset as quick as possible. And yeah, and those are things. So basically, we will talk tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So thanks, everybody, for showing up today. 9 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow, Monday through Friday. We're going to keep doing these Facebook Lives. So I'll see you guys 9 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow.